Hey, welcome back to the Wayfarer podcast. So good to be back around the table. It's been a little bit. These episodes just kind of show up, but for us, there's like too much time in between and so much life happens in between each episode. But we're going to get into a good conversation. We've kind of set the stage for the wayfaring journey. Tonight, we're going to push a little bit further. And actually, the whole point of this, we said it from the first episode, was we don't just want to talk about it. There's so many conversations like this where we're talking about it. And you mentioned it earlier, like we don't have all the answers. That's not the point. The point of this podcast is to say everybody around the world is recognizing that there's more. There's something. We talk about haunted for transcendence. And we could go deep into book recommendations about what's going on. Reality is people are wanting the fullness of life. And everybody's looking, and we're looking, and we want to follow that way that leads to a fullness of life. So we're going to get into that, but we don't have Jonathan tonight, which I'm super sad about. So
wait, you don't mean I'm Jonathan?
Yeah. No, Riley's usually across the camera. That's our producer, Riley. Say hi, Riley.
Hi.
There you go. Next to Riley.
I thought it would be weird if this seat was empty, so I figured I would take it. Big shoes to fill, Jonathan.
We're glad you did.
I hope I can do well.
We miss you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
I see Jonathan.
Yep. Katya, Jared, so good to have you guys back. Since the last conversation, this wayfaring conversation, we kind of huddled up and said, okay, I think we're ready. We've talked about perspective. We've talked about the fact that recovering the wayfaring posture is to say that the Christian faith is actually a journey. You don't just sign a document or say, oh, I believe these things, and then check, done, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally an invitation. And Jesus's invitation was to go walk around, find regular, normal people like us. And he intersected with them and said, come follow me. And there was an invitation there that was alluring. There was an authority to his voice. There was a way that he was connecting with people that literally made people drop everything and go, I'm in, because there's something there. But that journey requires leaving something behind. And that's what I want to get into tonight. We kind of tried to get our mind around Plato's allegory of the cave. This was really helpful to me as I was writing, and I was thinking about what it takes to leave something that you've thought to be reality behind. And Plato's work has stood the test of time. It's been one of the most helpful ways of getting our mind around that transition. When you dug into that a little bit, what were some of the first thoughts that came to your mind? Just as you were like, have I read this before? I maybe read it back in school, but I haven't revisited it for a while. But what stood out to you when you just picked up that allegory of the cave and started diving in?
First thing I thought was The Matrix, ironically enough. Just because, it's the whole idea that like, what we're seeing isn't actually what we're seeing. So that's immediately what I thought of. And of course, like, I feel like in school, a lot of what we learn is based off of that concept, but no one ever ties it back to it. I don't know why, what's up with that. But I just saw a lot of big like names using his concept, which I don't know what like I said, I don't know what that's about. Yeah.
Now, if you literally look at pop culture influenced by that direct allegory, The Matrix is like top of the list. People will say, yep, it's literally right there. And all of education is structured around that conversation of how do you move to a higher level of thinking.
Yeah, very similar. Red pill, blue pill, all the way. I think it's a very like ancient kind of way of thinking, which I thought it's like fascinating how it stood the test of time so well. It really speaks to like who Plato was, that he was such a brilliant little guy, but I don't think he ever tied it back to Christianity, which stinks. Not as smart as Zach.
Yeah, well, we got the little guy part. I was like, do you know his actual height? Like,
they were small back then. I feel pretty confident going for it.
You just demean Plato so much by calling him little guy.
Great writing.
He's
a little small,
That's
right.
Short
kings.
Short
it's
kings,
okay.
right?
Shout out to short kings.
Riley, what'd you think?
My mind right away when I heard the cave, I was like, how dark is the cave? I don't know. I was just like,
kids are scared of the dark.
Yeah, I was like, the cave sounds kind of scary to me. It sounds kind of dark, and I was just like, I don't know, where was I in the cave, and how dark was it, and how scared was I in the cave? What did that look like? My mind was just right away like, I wonder where I was at in the cave, or when I was in the cave.
Yeah. Yeah, here's the deal. Maybe people listening, we just do this really quick, a quick sketch. And this is what's so cool about a great story is it's really pretty simple. This is nested within the Republic. So classic Plato writing this incredible text of the Republic, and there's multiple books throughout it. This allegory of the cave is a part of this greater body of work that he put out. And in the story, there's a conversation between Socrates, who's the teacher, Plato, who's a student, and Plato's brother. And there's this dialogue going on in kind of classic form of learning for them. And the story that is told is that there's these prisoners, and these prisoners exist in a cave, and they're held underground, and they're chained at the neck, and they have to face forward. And so they're looking forward, and on the wall of the cave in front of them are all of these shadow images. And so what they see in their imprisonment is this incredible display of shadows. Well, that's coming because behind them is a light, and there's puppeteers projecting things up onto this screen that they become convinced is reality. It's all they know. And as the story goes, what is it like in that cave when you are literally inside something that you have come to accept as reality, the narrative for your life, and you say, that's the fullness of life, that's the story. And he goes on and he presses it, and he says, well, you get about life. You build a system of merits and rewards, and all of your economy, everything's based on this flattened fiction that you know. And he says, what happens if somebody challenges that? What if somebody were to enter that cave from the outside and say, like, you're in a cave. You're seeing like flattened fictions. These things are being projected in front of you. That's what's being told to you, but that's actually not reality. And he goes through that story and says, how difficult would it be to start to accept that there's more than you've been told there is? And he uses this for education. He says, you have to move on from some of these things that get challenged that are clearly not reality. That's what lands us in the moment to say we live in a Western world, right? Who post-Enlightenment, the entire conversation's been, Charles Taylor, we talk about this, the immanent frame, that we live in a material world. Mm-hmm. And the idea was you have magic, and then you have religion, and then you have science. And the narrative in the Western world is when we are kind of in our savage state, you think magical thinking. There's fairies and demons and gods and all these things. And that kind of thinking leads to religion. And so then you start worshiping some of this. You build stories around this to control people. That's the narrative. And the idea is, well, if we can get some science in here, we can disprove all that. And we can just get on to the fact that there's a material world. Well, everybody watching this, like we've all just come of age believing that projected on the wall. And I think what everybody's saying is, but we're haunted for something else and we feel it. Charles Taylor says that. A bunch of people have written about this. Here's my question. Have you experienced that kind of haunting that says, I don't know if that's the whole story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's definitely just been moments in my life. I grew up a Christian, but like moments where I'm like exploring life outside of faith and just like living, and you try to do all these things to kind of fulfill your life, or like, whether it's doing yoga, like working out, like being productive, and you do all these things. And like, I'd get to the end of a day where I felt super productive and just be like, is this life? And it's like, is this it? And it's like this, supposedly all these things that should fulfill, make me feel whole, make me feel like a good person, like ultimately feels very empty on some levels, and you're just like, man, it's like I thought I was drinking water, but I'm still thirsty.
Yeah
Totally. I think I felt this the most when I was applying to college, and I was going through my SATs and ACTs, and like to this day that was probably like the worst my mental health has ever been, just because I was constantly trying to reach this level of satisfaction, and when I couldn't get to it, I thought that life was just bleak and I couldn't do anything and I wasn't worth anything. And but then there was always this, like, I think life is bigger than this. Like, life isn't numbers. Like, I'm so confused. I feel distraught. And I remember one day my dad and I were talking, and he was like, you're looking at a tree. Like, you're in a forest, but all you're doing is sitting this close to the tree, and you're not allowing yourself to see the forest. And he's like, you need to step back and look at the entirety of the picture instead of just standing nose close to a tree. Because who's going to see the bigger picture if you're looking at life like that? And I think once I started to do that, and we're not at that point yet, we're not out of the cave at this point, but I think that's when I started to look at life a little bit differently. But I think for sure, whether it's like college or even now I'm leaving college and I'm feeling that heading into the workforce, I'm like, I feel like I have to prove myself all over again to people when it's like our worth is just who we are. As you say, Zach, like you are enough just being here. And so I feel like that for me was definitely the toughest. And I bet other people probably could say the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you make your own cave almost? Like I'm thinking for me, and I'm just thinking back like when I feel like I was in like this dark world that like, and trying to think of like what was it that was holding me in that cave, or like what made me go to the cave kind of thing. And like for me it's like I feel like I almost made that, and it was like probably influenced by things going on, but it was like when I was in the cave, like I felt this and I made that. Like nobody else projected that onto me. Like that wasn't something that like I was born, like I wasn't born with that feeling of like for me, like my cave, I felt like it was like being like alone, like that kind of feeling. And I feel like I wasn't born alone. I feel like I was born with like my family, and like I was loved probably as a baby and carried and everything. And so I'm like thinking, and I'm like, did I put myself in the cave? Not necessarily create the cave, but did I put myself in the cave and then create what was on the wall almost in my head?
You're doing like shadow figures.
Yeah,
shadow figures. Oh my gosh, look at that.
So,
Andy Mineo has a great album called The Arrow, and he has like this art on it where it's like an arrow going through a cloud. And he's just like talking about like his journey of faith, like when he's under the cloud and when he's in the cloud, he can't see the sun. And he was just like, it came from when he was on an airplane and he couldn't, they thought they were going to die because they were in the middle of this storm. There's all this turbulence and everything. And then he like gets to the other side of the cloud and it's like, oh, the sun is still here. It's all peaceful. It's like God never left. It's like I was in a cloud. And he relates it to his like own faith of like doubts and everything. But one of the lines he says is like maybe I constructed the cloud in a lot of ways. And I think like we can definitely do that to ourselves, you know, if we're not diligent about, you know, wanting to work and like leave the cave. The cave, I think, is a lot like gravity. It's constantly trying to pull you back, and you have to actively work against that. So I definitely think you can, you know, be in the cave, lock yourself in chains, and sit there with a key right next to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
do
think
shadow
that-
figures too, I guess.
you could try it. I think you're right. I think that if you think about like an onion or anything with layers that you keep peeling through, there's reality that is like there is a visible and an invisible world. And that's part of what we're trying to say even on this wayfaring journey is we will not experience who we are and what we're made for and what it is to understand when Jesus says, I came that you might have life and have it to the full. We won't understand that if we only look at a visible world. We have to start saying this thing it's bigger than we imagined it to be. It's a visible and an invisible world. And there's someone that's pre-existent. Time itself is a created thing. Until we're willing to like open up to that visible and invisible world again, we're still going to be kind of stumbling through the dark. So I think that that's the big picture. But within that, and Plato even goes there in the cave and he says you could kind of literally construct a pretty flourishing life within the cave based on that fiction. And I think we all do that, right? Like create a whole system of merits and rewards. And that's why he says, if somebody were to come in and challenge that, would you not kill them? And I mean, that's the heart of it. When you've built, whether it's achievement around school or your career or whatever it is, you've built this thing and you need it to be true. And somebody comes and says, I don't know that that's all there is for you, but you're committed to it. And you're like, I can't let go of that. Yeah, it's hard.
And I feel like that's where like the hauntingness almost comes in now that you were like talking about. It's like you have that feeling of like, all right, I'm in the cave and I've constructed this, but there's something else there. And it's like, I don't know, like thinking about it for me, I'm like jumpy. Like I'm like, oh, what is that kind of, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, Charles Taylor's the one who coined that term, I think, haunted. And James K. Smith took that and fleshed it out a little bit. It was meaningful to me to go, we live in a God-haunted world. Nietzsche said God is dead. And you think about that and you're like, no, he's dead. He doesn't exist. You're like, well, you're living in his house. Like, there's a spirit that is literally present. And it is a God-haunted world. That's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see people longing for more and not satisfied with life. I think that's like in abundance right now. And it's like, well, what do you, like, if we're just a physical world, it's like, what do you think is out there? Like, what do you think is actually missing? Like, if you're housed, fed, and it's like, oh, purpose, meaning, it's like, well, if we're just atoms, then like none of that means anything. And it's like this feeling is unfounded. And it's like, how can you say that?
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I listened to a podcast the other day, and it was kind of talking about the concept of religion and then the concept of spirituality. And this lady, she's like a professor at Columbia University. Like, she's been studying this, like the psychology, the science behind spirituality. And she's pretty much saying that, like, we are wired to question. Like, it doesn't, like, put religion aside and just put us as human beings. We question. Like, we have this concept of wanting to know the answers of the universe. And in that's where we get our religions from. But at the center of it, we all have this inkling that there is something greater than us. And I thought that was so cool coming from someone who isn't religious. Yeah. And they completely were kind of spot on everything that we've been feeling. So I don't know. I think that's a really cool perspective to throw out there too. That it doesn't, I mean, always have to be like specifically. Like everyone has the inkling. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think you're right. It is a universal thing. That longing is universal. Mm-hmm. That's Lewis, he was saying that longing, that thing that says, if I was made for something that's beyond this world, like the only possible conclusion I can come to is that I was made for another world. Mm-hmm. And that set something ablaze for him. And I think this is what my hope is for everybody tracking with this conversation is I just want to say, like, yes, I want to give you permission. Katya, you're right. It's universal. It transcends border and boundary and denomination, all that. There is a human thing that longs for transcendence. Mm-hmm. And we're calling it on the Wayfarer podcast to just say, yes, just yes, yes, yes. Like, understand that if you feel that longing and that haunting and that stirring for something other, lean into it. Lean into it, because the day of that flattened fiction, it's kind of it's ending. I think this is what I love about a younger generation. It's just like more honest and willing to be like, I don't think so. That idea is insufficient for who I know I am as a being, and so there's got to be something else.
Yeah, we're quick to judge.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that.
No.
You're welcome.
Hey, quick to judge insufficient ideas. I love that.
No, it's funny because you were talking about building your own cave. And I think that a major one that I've even probably done once in my life is the cave is you just ignoring it. And I think we've obviously been talking about that. But I was in class the other day and we were kind of talking about all the bad news in the world and journalism and whatever. I'm a public relations major. That's why we were talking about it. And we were just talking about how everything's kind of negative. And I was asking the professor, like, don't you think that a lot of this could be avoided if people would just give themselves time to think about why they're doing certain things? Like, why are they putting fake news out in the world? Like, why are they putting news that's slandering people? I'm like, if they just give themselves like a couple minutes a day, they could probably get to the bottom of why they're so hateful to others. And she looked at me and she was like, that's a very naive thing to say to me. And I was like, but isn't it like, I don't know. And so it's funny because now she calls me like insightful Katya or something like that. Because I'm always questioning it. I'm like, why can't you just give yourself the time? But it's true. You want to ignore it because there's like a certain level of comfort when you get into this steady rhythm of satisfactions, whether it's from work or from social or from just pleasure itself. Like, there's little ways you can ignore, and it's like in this glass in front of me, it's like you're going every other way except for looking right into it. And so it's just funny to me that, like, me even asking someone who isn't religious by any means, and I got that answer.
Oh, it's so good. I want to talk about how hard it is to leave the cave, but I think you brought up just the saturation of news and like the apocalyptic, like the world's going to end. It's, that we're so divided. Like, here's the deal. And I'm just going to put this out there. It'll kick up some good, healthy debate, I hope. But what is projected on a flattened screen? Like, I mean, if you think about this writing that was 375 to 380, somewhere in there, this dialogue, Socrates, Plato's brother, and they're saying, what would happen if people were literally imprisoned and forced to watch something that's being mediated to them and told that that is reality? And he goes right at it and says, how hard would it be for them to believe that anything other was actually real?
Well, hopefully if they're watching the Wayfarer podcast, it's easy.
They go, yeah. But literally tomorrow, Apple Pro drops. And we're literally, this screen is coming closer and closer and closer and closer to the point that we are literally mediating life through a different filter. How hard is it?
Calling it alternative reality.
Yes. I mean, this is where I'm like, hey, what, to your point, like if you just took that thing off, like I'm not a fan of it. Like if you just take that thing off and look at the person sitting next to you without all the news telling you how they probably think, what they feel. I mean, it reads your face and facial recognition and says she votes this way or that way or bought this, or, I mean, literally you have this profile of people. It's like, wait a second, let me actually spend time with you. But here's the question. How hard is it to have those positions challenged? I mean, think about that in our own life. We've been conditioned over and over and over and over to just believe the things that are projected constantly in front of us.
Yeah. I did challenge it in class and I got an answer saying,
you're naive.
Yeah. And it was like, and then like the professor took almost a defensive stance. Like you were saying, like you get so caught that you don't want to rid of that. You were comfortable with it. And so the professor then was like defending the stance of the news and things like that. And I mean, I think to a certain extent it's important to be knowing, of course, but I think that there's a certain level of when people just want you to only think a certain way and not be independently thinking about a different reality. Because I think that's we're getting into a different conversation.
I almost think it'd be good to like switch the context, almost like being comfortable in it. It's like how often have we been in something that's not good for us, but we're comfortable in it? Or like even like my mind jumps right to like a relationship. Like how often have you stayed in a relationship that's probably not good for you, but you're comfortable in it, so you're not doing anything to get out of it or change it? And it's like, why? Because we're comfortable. Like it's
true.
It's not great, but it might be better than what's on the other side of it, and so that's what we know, so we're just gonna stay in it and be comfortable.
What do you think it takes? Do you have a story? I'm wondering if any of you have a story where it actually happened, where somebody literally was able to say like, what the way that you are seeing the world is actually not reality, and I want to show you a different perspective, and you were actually like, wow, I see that, and you moved. Has shift like that ever taken place?
Boys?
The boys are like,
Jared?
we've always seen it like it is.
I've been pretty wise since I was a young age. No, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, I think I'm really curious where society's going to go with social media and that like exhaustion. Because it's nobody would contest that social media is like ultimately bad for you. Like I feel like anybody that uses social media is like, oh yeah, time away from social media is a positive impact on our lives, but we just continue to double down, expand, change slightly, optimize to get our attention, get us hooked into it. And it's like, at what point is there a breaking point where we're like, it's not working, we're not getting better, we're not happy, we're not satisfied with that, which I think is just like hilarious. It's like, but people are like so dug into it and like convinced of it, and there is so much good of social media. It's a shame to try to throw the whole thing out, but it ultimately, there's so many people just exhausted trying to, get little dopamine hits from it. and survive off of it. And I'm guilty of that as much as anybody. I'm on TikTok, like I'm scrolling, and it's like, but we know like reading a book, you feel better after. You feel better reading a book than you do scrolling for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's just,
Genuinely.
I know that for a fact. And I will scroll on TikTok tonight instead of read a book.
In our group chat, we
Maybe
were all
not.
like, "Oh, gonna go to sleep. Good night, guys." And then I was like, I have this new rom-com book. I'm really excited to read it before I go to bed. And I purposefully like put my phone down and was gonna like read this, but then all of a sudden had like a scratch on my brain that was like, I need to go back on TikTok. And so I went on TikTok for like 30 minutes and I texted in the group chat and I was like, I never read my rom-com book.
Yeah.
And then Jared said the same thing. He's like, me too. What did you do?
I had
Something
I
like that.
had like made tea, got my book, sat down,
Good English person.
and then I sent back, and I was like, that could never be me. Except I just did that for 30 minutes.
Dude, I literally ordered a lamp for next to my bed so I would like not have an excuse, because like my excuse for it was like, well, I don't like reading, and then it was like, oh, well, I don't have like a lamp next to my bed to turn on, so like my lights are really bright if I want to read. And I was like, oh, I'll order a lamp so then I can read. And then I was like, oh, I'm still not doing it. Oh, I'll delete TikTok so I can read and not have, the scrolling thing there waiting for me. And then I'm like on Instagram now scrolling through reels, or on YouTube scrolling through shorts. And it's like, no matter what, there's going to be something there like that your attention is going to want to go to instead of doing something like that, because it's comfortable, I feel like. And it's like, how do you break that habit then of like scrolling? And instead of scrolling, you sit down, read a book, or you do something that's more beneficial to your mind.
I think there's a fear factor in the sense of feeling FOMO in the entire game. And I can see
What's
this
FOMO?
fear of missing out.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, just making
Riley
for
did,
all those people
Riley
listening.
did that for my benefit.
Oh, did you know it?
Zach's completely lost.
I mean, I didn't say that. You said it. So
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's
Terrified
it's
of it.
like as like a business person, you look at it and you're like, well, my business won't get any leads if I'm not on social media, because a lot of businesses blow up from social media. And then you have this like, oh, well, if they could do it, I could do it. And so then you continue going on social media. But then there's also like the fear of just missing out on what's trending in culture, in life. I had a friend who she completely got off TikTok in 2023. And she said the one thing that was really hard for her in giving up TikTok was that people around her were like singing songs, dancing dances, wearing certain clothes, and she couldn't relate. And so she fell out of the circle. And that's kind of scary if you think about it, because it's like we live in such a social world where we need to have people and we need to relate to people. And if we don't, there's a sense of I failed and I don't belong. And I need to feel that. And so if you're out of this loop, there's the fear factor of I'm not going to relate to people.
Yeah.
And
I think social media is the easiest thing to be like, we're in the cave locked, and somebody said, look, outside is right there. Social media isn't good. You can get out of the cave. And we all kind of look at outside of the cave and we're like, yeah, we're going to stay right here. No.
yeah.
You know
my
what's
best friend's
so-
here, my family's here.
This is why I just appreciate you all for like hashing it out and talking about it, because again, you start and you're like, hey, let's start with Plato, and everybody's like, oh my goodness, this is an abstraction, it's right. But then we're literally sitting here, and if Socrates and Plato and Glaucon, his brothers, sat down, they were like, literally the story we're telling is the reality that you all are living. And we're like, I know, I can't look away. And we feel like and in the story, he says we've built a system of merits and rewards, likes, clicks, data, all these things that reinforce that this is, and it's almost impossible to break away. Just outside of the cave, though, is this, and again, we don't want to make a thin character out of the cave, because I think to Riley's point, to all your point, cave is so many different things that are holding us imprisoned to something that is less than the fullness of life. So we've got to keep it anchored there. And everybody listening, like, go think about that for a little bit, and just what is it that has become the reality that you are literally convinced is the whole thing, and yet you have this haunting and longing for something beyond that. It's a good question, good conversation to have. But outside of the cave, we were made for relationship. It's who we are made to be. We are creatures who are made for relationship. And that relationship does have a transcendent dimension. That's what Lewis was getting at. He was saying it's not, and we've lost even the relational connection, right? We're so socially connected, yet the Surgeon General's report, loneliness epidemic in America. So there's something to talk about on this plane of relationship. But what Lewis is saying, and I think what we're discovering, is that haunting and longing is, I was made for another.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's almost like what you were like poking at the beginning, Katya, of like, oh, we want to know like the answers. Like we want to know what the meaning is to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, your conversation earlier, like, why do I get good at my craft? Why do I want to laugh? Why do I want to feel the experience of love? And Jared went right there. I don't know if anybody caught it, but he said, if there's no transcendent reality that's created this whole thing and given it meaningful coherence and purpose, then having that desire for love doesn't make sense. And if we're forced into that position to take it and to dogmatically anchor to that, we can't live with that, because then we're chained in the cave going, but I long for love. I long to be seen. I long to experience joy, right? And so there's an ache there, and we have to, this is the invitation for the Wayfaring podcast, is to say, I think I just want to lean into it.
Yeah.
What if I just take the risk to say, what if outside of this, there is a reality that I can know God and be known by God? And in doing so, realize that if God exists and I was made by that God for that God, and that's true for me, then who else is that true for? And as soon as I make that connection, I can't make that connection without looking at you and going, that's true for you too. And instantly there's a dimension of your being that just explodes. This is what happened to Lewis. He was like, there's no mere mortals. I can't look at you the same. Once I've seen reality like that, then I'm literally sitting next to somebody who is made by God. What? Put my phone away. Like, I want to know more of you, right? Like, if that's really who you are, then come on.
It's great. Do you think you could, this is a question that I feel like I could feel sometimes. Do you feel sometimes that you are unchained in the cave? Do you feel you're unchained in the cave and you can go out for breathers and then you come back in? And then, you know what I mean? Like, and then, because I think that in a way that I feel sometimes I live like that, because I think looking at social media and looking at what we have as reality nowadays is like, you can use those tools to help other people see. And so you have to get into the cave.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I feel like almost like as our like calling to like missionally engage with people, it's like, well, if everyone's in the cave, like, does that mean we have to step back in the cave to like engage with them? Or like, do we just sit outside the cave like most of modern Christianity and call like out people? It's like,
Shepherd Raj.
Yeah, you know,
drop things in.
Yeah, like, I don't know.
I think that's the beauty of the incarnation, right? We just left the Christmas season and it was like, no, light entered darkness. But to Socrates and Plato's conversation, they said, would they not kill him? Well, light entered darkness. And if you read John, the text in John, it's like, but darkness didn't necessarily take to light. And I think we're going to pay a price to go back in there. So I think it's wise to catch that and say there is a reality that on a couple fronts, right? You said something really important. Is it possible to be set free? I think we are. I think the resurrection literally is light entering into darkness and making it possible to say, come on out, right?
Yeah.
Like, oof.
There's no physical chain to us in the cave.
Come on, right?
It's an imaginary one almost that we've made.
Think about Lazarus in the cave there and Jesus outside it saying, come on out. And he literally has the capacity to come out. He's responding to a power that's able to draw him out. He's still got to walk out.
That's good.
So I think you can be free in the cave and choose to stay because it's comfortable, to your point, because it's what we know, because the rewards and systems and merits, because it's hard, because I don't want to be ridiculed, because I don't want to leave the tribe. There's all those things are in play, right? And I think that we have to be honest that when I was writing and thinking about Plato's cave, there was just this haunting thing that I felt that was the cave yawns wide at your back all the time. And so as we're
Say that again? Sorry.
the cave yawns wide at your back. And it's just that sense, this foreboding sense that even as I'm wayfaring, that invitation to look back and to go back, like it's so comfortable, right? And you think about addiction and anything that we've used to escape and to numb, because sometimes the complexity of reality is like, man, I don't want to do that. I want to go right back in there and just take, the fiction is easier for me. So I think you're right, for sure.
It's like, and now we're getting into religion. I mean, as we should.
Let's go.
But Jesus did make the ultimate sacrifice so that we could live. But I think that in following in his image, we don't need to die in the cave like he had to get back up. We can come in and out of the cave to represent his love and help people get out as well. But we don't need to die in it.
Yeah. I think it's the most beautiful thing about the Christian faith is it's done. That gateway, that doorway has been opened up, and God has literally said, no, there is far more, and I've made a way. It's so good. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to forget. Once you get outside the cave, it can feel great. I keep thinking of it like drinking like water. And it's so easy to, drink salt water and feel like it's kind of quenching, but it doesn't ultimately. And I think so many people are walking in life and they're drinking salt water and they're like, man, this isn't satisfying me, but I don't know what to do. So I'm going to keep watching social media. I'm going to keep, eating a ton, drinking a ton, doing anything they can to try to satiate themselves.
You drink salt water?
You're not supposed to. Salt water makes you not, it doesn't fulfill you ultimately.
Doesn't
I don't think I've ever drank salt water.
It's a big metaphor I'm trying to make.
Okay, sorry. My mind got stuck on salt
Like,
water.
Riley's
I
like
was making
chuckling
weird
in the corner.
faces, and I was like, salt water?
Hey,
What?
we're doing a thing right now, a podcast.
Oh, that's what this... okay, we got my nights mixed up.
He's not used to sitting on this.
Yeah, I thought we were just hanging out, guys.
Kidding.
I'm not used to being over
Hey,
here.
producer, can you? No, I'm just kidding.
Kidding.
So the salt water is a metaphor for people running to other things to try to satiate them. But Jesus and being outside of the cave is like real water because it does like hydrate you. It makes you feel whole. But I think it is so easy to start trying to drink from other wells and like quote unquote go back into the cave because I think you can do that instantly. And so it's like it's not some like giant journey of like, am I in the cave? Am I out the cave? I think you can go in and out so fast.
Yeah.
It's like you can be 1 hour outside, vision up, doing the whole thing, and then all of a sudden you just fall back into the cave because it's like, oh, this or that or this temptation or whatever, and you're drinking salt water and you're just hoping it fulfills you, and it doesn't. And I think you see so many people who get to, we'll call it the pinnacle of the cave, and they've like reached all this success and they're still so haunted and still so thirsty, and they reach the top and are still sad, lonely, and needing fulfillment. And that's where astrology comes from, because people run to the stars, anything to believe in transcendence.
Yeah.
What about the person who is like, okay, I hear what you guys are saying, but what if I am drinking the Jesus water and living in the cave? It's like, can I do that? Is that possible? It's like, what? I don't know. That's kind of what's popping in my head as like someone who maybe watched this is like, well, I'm drinking Jesus water, but I'm living in the cave. Like, what's wrong? I
think there's a lot of religious salt water that people drink, to keep the analogy going.
Yeah.
I'm still not tied to this analogy.
Fake salt water. But like, I think you can get really bought into, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this, and be a good Christian. And you think that you're being a Christian, but you're living in the cave.
Yeah.
And I think that's really easy to do. And I've definitely done that at times where I'm like, well, I've done 5 quiet times this week, so I'm a good Christian. And like, God loves me because of that. And it's like, that's drinking salt water. That's not what Jesus is calling to. That's not living outside of the cave. And I've seen people walk away from their faith when I'm not sure they ever really got out of the cave to begin with.
I think that that's one of the most challenging things, is that when you are in a system of religion that's been built in the cave that is void of the relational dimension, you do that for over and over and over and over and over, and finally you're just like, I think I'm done. I think I have to try something else. And I get that. because you haven't met that one that came in to call you out of the cave to something else. And if you haven't experienced that, and you just are practicing practices and habits that are divorced from the being of God and the more mystical dimension of a relationship with the living God, if that has not been a part of the conversation, then those habits and practices do wear on, because there's the habits and practices are supposed to be wedded to the relational reality. So I think this is such a good, here's what I'm hoping for as we open up this conversation is, again, we kind of shifted perspective and we said, listen, for the longest time, this perspective of a wayfarer, this metaphor of a wayfarer, we're going on a journey that's been the most helpful way to think about the Christian faith, and it's been lost. So let's recover that. If we're going to do that, we got to shift our perspective. We got to understand it's going to be a longer, slower, deeper conversation, and I want that. We're going to do it together. We're not going to do it alone, right? These are all the things that we set up. And tonight we're kind of saying, let's go. And my hope really with inviting this conversation was to say, again, my intuition says there are hundreds of thousands of people who are having the same conversation, and they're looking at their phone and they're going, why did I just go 45, 55 minutes tonight scrolling? And I'm looking, what is that longing? And part of a helpful thing is to a conversation like this is we can just have common language. Oh, the cave? Yeah, that thing that was reality that I thought was the fullness of the story. I've been there too. And you meet somebody else who goes, I've been there too. Yeah. Were you haunted in there? Yes. Okay. Is it possible? Yeah, it's a struggle, right? There's a system of merits and rewards that wants to keep you in there, but it's possible. As soon as we start having that conversation, a little doorway to freedom opens up, a little hopeful invitation to exit out of the cave. And I'm hoping that's what's happening tonight. So if you're resonating with this conversation, you're not alone. That's what we want to participate in. And I say it every time, but reach out. Like, everybody here has an email address exactly the same. Jared@vuvivo.com, Katya, vuvivo.com, Riley. We want to create a dialogue with people who are all over the world saying, I've felt that. Lewis felt it. You guys are feeling it. I feel it, and I want to go on that journey. But it's the first thing we have to say is it starts with a confession to say that thing that says there's something more. Pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. There is something.
Yeah, not letting it control you. You can control it.
So like and subscribe on social media. Scroll through our content. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I thought you were doing it. Honestly,
we just spent 40 minutes bashing social media. And then back, so like and subscribe, follow.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying we're not bashing it because we are the ones controlling it. Yeah. As long as you understand it, you can control it.
Yeah.
Right?
We just had a good conversation today about technology as a good, right?
Yeah.
It is a good, as long as it is not, you're not the slave to the thing.
Agreed.
So, but it's a good conversation to have. So I want to explore, maybe the next episode we can talk about what happens when you exit out, right? And you start to come into a fullness of life and a fullness of relationship. And it causes you to see things differently and to have to recalibrate our vision. That in and of itself is filled with joy and exhilaration, but challenge too. So
yeah, because like for that person who's in the cave and they're like right at the doorway and they're like, oh, I see what's outside there. Like, it's like, but what if nobody else is out there? What's out there even? Like, all I see is what I can see from the doorway of the cave. And it's like, I don't know what's past that. Like, how, like, is that, like, I'm comfortable here. So it's like, why don't I stay? What's outside there? I don't know what that is. And it's like, how do I, like, what's out there? What's making me want to go out there even? As that person who's in a cave, it's like, what's out there? Why would I want to go out there almost?
Yeah. I think dare to risk it for something. Like, we all get to that point where something our discomfort has to be great enough that we're willing to risk that thing that we think might be not perfect, might be fearful. I don't know what's around the corner, but this is not sufficient anymore. So yeah. Hey, if you have not read The Allegory of the Cave, do it. Go look at, I think you can't get out without a book recommendation. Plato's Republic. Get Plato's Republic. Look for book 7, I think it is. You'll find The Cave, The Allegory of the Cave. Just read through it. It's a fun dialogue to read like that.
We'll put it in the description.
Yeah, let's go. And what a good conversation. Again, it's just a way of seeing, a way of thinking through this. But I want to do this just because we get to go on this journey together and help kind of recover a way of supporting each other in this moment, for you to kind of tonight be able to go to that rom-com novel and not go back to, how can we encourage you? And I want to ask you guys the same thing. Like, we're trying to live this out, and we're trying to not have that yawn wide at the back pull us back into this thing. What's the most helpful thing that we can do, that you need, that keeps you kind of leaning into a new adventure, a new journey, and not going back?
I feel like maybe this is more of a personal thing, but maybe we could do this together, where it's like, before you get onto the app, like, why are you going on the app? Like, are you going because you're bored? Are you going because you're going to put something out there? Are you like, maybe, I don't know if that's a friend accountability thing, but maybe it could be. But I feel like I need to ask myself that, like, what is our purpose ongoing here? What is the intention of doing anything? And taking those steps.
At the end of the day, having to send how much time you're on Instagram, and you're like, justify it. What'd you do? How much time did you create? What were you doing?
That's what I'm saying.
That'd be tough.
I love the suggestion.
7 hours of Instagram. It's like,
That's what
I
I'm
was
saying.
creating. There's a lot of
Ask a
stories.
question.
I did a lot of polls today.
Maybe it. I mean, like I said, it's a personal question for the viewers.
I think
You
so.
know.
I thought it was good. I was expanding on your point.
Thank
He's
you, Jared.
bashing it.
What is it for you? Yeah.
I think just like seeking the truth and what is good. Like, I think like when I like really think about that, and like long term, what's great. Like right now, like I'm in a transformation challenge for Orange Theory, and it's like, every night I want to eat Five Guys burger and I want popcorn. And it's like,
Low calorie popcorn?
I do have low calorie popcorn. Thank you, Reddit. But it's like, I can make those choices to like, it's like, oh, I have a goal in mind. There's a something I'm chasing. And it's like, so I'm going to make decisions based off that to get there. And it's like, I think like getting in that mind frame around social media, of like, social media is a good thing in a certain context, and it's like, it's not bad to be on it, but it's like, I think you agree, if you're going there because you're bored, then it's like, that is going to be a soul-sucking experience where it's like, you're going to constantly feel empty at the end of that. Like, you don't ever get off of it and feel whole, although Twitter does have some zingers sometimes that really gets me. I guess it's X now. But ultimately it's like, it's so much better to invest in other things of like what are you getting, what's your return on investment and with your time. And I think if you look at your phone time over like a month, it is devastating to see how long you've been just looking at your phone rather than doing something.
Yeah. I think that idea of, ask the question, like, why am I going there? Good.
Simple.
It's a good, and I can enjoy that. I can go look at pictures, connect with friends, do these things. It's good. Why am I doing it? Just be mindful of that, so that it isn't just boredom and malaise that pulls me into it. I love your suggestion of just being mindful of the amount of time. Like, if you find that you have more time on screen than in embodied engagement with people, nature, physical activity, that's probably a pretty like healthy
Probably your
sign.
sign to get off your phone.
Like, spend more time in reality, and I'm saying that with just how easy is it to, I work on a computer all day. You can spend literally 8 or 9 hours connected to devices. You got to fight that and go, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go for a walk. And it takes effort. So, and do it together. What works for you? What do you?
I'm going to go rapid fire because I feel like I got 3 things. One, I feel like one thing that helps me is like, one, what's my end goal? And so like for me right now, like this month, I've like been trying to challenge myself to read more and scroll less. Like every week, that's like my number one challenge for the week is like read more, scroll less. And so it's like, well, why do I want to do that? Well, one, I want to do that because like I want to read this book. But the main reason is like, I don't really have enough time in my schedule to carve out an hour of just reading. So it's like, how do I make that time? And it's like, well, when I sit in bed for 30 minutes before I go to bed and scroll, it's like, I should probably just read in that time instead of scrolling on social media for 30 minutes, good. And then like another way I feel like I'm trying to do that is kind of something like you helped me push towards which is like having a book with you always. So that way when like I'm sitting here waiting for 5 minutes to start the Wayfarer podcast, instead of scrolling on my phone, I can just open that book and read, at least a paragraph or something, maybe a few pages, whatever it is. So those are like good. Some, like having, and then even consequences too. And this is where like I feel like it gets scary but fun also. Like if you bring like your friends in and like you guys hold each other accountable, it's like, if you say, Katya, you said you were going to read last night. It's like, well, if I say I'm going to read, but then I don't, what's my consequence? Because then you're definitely not going to want to scroll and not read.
Trust you guys with
$4.5 million.
I read.
It's like you have to do a 2-hour workout instead of an hour workout if you read. If you don't read, kind of, I don't know.
I love the suggestion. I love the idea that you're picking up books more. I think it was Lewis who said that he reads, maybe it had been Chesterton, but reads because through reading, I see the world through your eyes. And there's so many beautiful perspectives that I just don't have. And if I'll take the time to read your book and go through it or read through your lens, I go, oh, okay, that's how he saw that, or that's how she saw that. There's just a richness there that isn't scrolling. So I love that suggestion. Put a book in your hand, carry it around. You'll find that you can go to those pages and authors.
You look smarter too.
There you go. Right. That's good.
No.
You are.
Looking smart. That's what we're aiming to do.
That's
in the
all you
Wayfarer
gotta
podcast.
Hey, please, if that happens, then I'm a happy man. Because
Are you trying to call us?
Like, let's go.
Zach's like, please look
Zach's
smart.
like, you guys look so
Please.
dumb. Please carry a book at least.
Please look
go.
smart.
This is good. I appreciate the time and just I'm super, super grateful for the way that you all lean into this conversation. And I say, let's keep going. And next time, let's talk about as we come up and kind of, and we'll keep that, be mindful that that's always there. It's always there and it'll keep us accountable, as you were saying, Riley. But next time, let's talk about transcendence. That's what I would love to do, is because that's really the antithetical thing about the cave is it says that there's only immanence. It's only this, right? And that invitation out of the cave pushes us kind of to your imagery of poking through the clouds. You enter a sphere where you're like, oh, no. There's a transcendent reality. And when human beings made for it, universally, made for transcendence, enter into a space where we are aware of a transcendent reality, something really good for us happens. I say it's the first position of us as creatures is actually to be in relationship like that. So we'll get into that next episode. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being a part of the wayfaring journey. And hopefully Jonathan will be back with us next time.
See you later.
Thank you, guys.
See you, everybody.